What's up, everybody? Welcome to System Crafters Live. I am David Wilson, and we're back again with another error on my screen because I have an error in my stream automation. That's okay. Welcome to System Crafters Live, a stream where we get together on Fridays as a community and talk about whatever topic I've come up with for the week, except for last week, which I missed because I was so busy trying to get things finalized for the first chapter, if you want to call it that, of the new hands-on Guile Scheme for Beginners course that just started last week. So sorry about that. I didn't really give any notice. I was literally like editing and exporting videos all the way up till the end of Friday night from my time zone. So that won't happen again because I had so much other stuff I had to do that week that kind of kept me from getting things done on time. But it's done now, and then all the rest of the stuff will be easier to do. So we will be back on the normal streaming schedule starting today, except for the week that I'm gone for Libra Planet, which we'll talk about in a minute, probably. Let me see if I can pull up the YouTube chat real quick. Say hello to the folks who have come so far. Hello to SB Code, Craig Jennings, Zoli, Russell Brinson, Robson Rodriguez, Antlers, Minas Mazar, Glenneth, Cal 2001, I see Jeff and Peter in the chat. Hello to Niklaus. Hot topic this week, says Niklaus. Yes, indeed. We're going to talk about some more Guile, that's for sure. Hello to Grizzly. Yeah, soon I need to get the YouTube chat piped back into the on-screen chat overlay. I can't see where I'm pointing because I have to keep switching between windows. Up here. That thing up here. I need to get YouTube chat in there, and I haven't done it yet. That'll be soon, though. Well, theoretically soon. We'll see. Let's see. Trent SK says, suddenly Ima Guile? Yes. Well, we've been talking about Guile for a few months now, at least, off and on. Oh, I think I just saw a little camera glitch. That's not fun. I'll have to keep an eye on that. Let me know if the camera ever freezes for longer than a couple seconds, because I don't know. I keep having to change things about my streaming setup because I haven't got like the perfect thing done yet, and there are occasional little blips, unfortunately. All right, let's get into the news. First of all, I wanted to point out, hey Anton, I wanted to point out that Benoit has created an awesome list on the forum. I don't know if you've heard of awesome lists before, but let's see, awesome list. It's kind of this thing people do around certain ecosystems, language ecosystems, programming ecosystems, etc., about gathering lists of notable projects or resources or whatever together in one place. This is like a big list of all lists, so it's like a meta awesome list. But anyway. Point being, Benoit has created one of those for the System Crafters community on the forum. You can go to the link that I have in the show notes, which aren't updated just yet, but they will be at the end of the show today. But basically, this is just a way for us to gather all of links to various different projects or configurations that are interesting to look at, or just members of the community. It's a place to gather all those things together. So I really appreciate Benoit for starting this up. This actually is a wiki page on the forum, so you can go edit this yourself to add yourself if you want, or add other things that you feel are missing. It could be general resources for Emacs and Geeks, but as Benoit created here, this is more of a sort of System Crafters focused list. So it could be about people in the community or projects that they've created, etc. So definitely take a look at that if you're interested in adding your own configuration or projects, etc. there. You do not have to be an Emacs user to share your configuration here. You can certainly be a NeoVim user. You can be a VS Code user. You can be whatever kind of user you want to be and share things here. Like Trev here, who is a NeoVim user and shared his NeoVim config. I think he's been using Emacs more recently, though. Mjolnir, hello Mjolnir. Happily surprised there's a stream today. Well, I only missed it once recently, so it's not like we've been gone forever. Zoli says, when is the next course? Hasn't really been announced yet, but I think I'll probably set one up for April at some point, maybe mid-April. Right around the time that taxes are due, I'll set up a new course so that everybody can procrastinate on getting their taxes done. Jeff says, no crafted Emacs link. Yes, that's something you can certainly go add if you want to. I haven't gone and added things here yet, so that's why certain projects haven't shown up yet. Mjolnir says there wasn't a thing on the YouTube showing there wasn't one planned. Yeah, I scheduled it probably about 2 hours ago. I don't know if YouTube's not doing a good job of showing those as it once did. Hello to Data Monoid. One thing geeks could benefit from is something akin to flake.nix. Yes, certainly flakes is something that people keep talking about in relation to geeks improvements, but we're talking about Guile today specifically. Hello to Alejandro in the chat. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to mention is that Glenneth has announced a project called Guile Stash, which you can check out here. This is basically if you've used GNU Sto before, Sto is a program for managing symbolic links to any kind of file, but a lot of people use it for managing their .files repositories. So you have a .files folder somewhere on your home folder and use GNU Sto to create symbolic links of all the files in that folder or all the files and directories inside of that folder to your home folder, basically. So it's a way to automatically set up all your symbolic links to your configuration files, etc. Glenn decided that as an interesting project, sorry, I saw something in the chat that distracted me. As an interesting project for, fleshing out his scheme knowledge, he wanted to work on a port of Sto to Guile. So Guile Stash is a program that would allow you to do the same kind of management of your .files with a program written in Guile instead of a program written in Perl, which is what Sto is. So definitely take a look at this project. It's pretty early on. Glenn got all of the initial functionality working, but there's plenty more to do. I think there's a list of things maybe on the README of things that you could do, but he's certainly looking for contributions. So check out the project repository, which I think is linked here, in the Getting Started section, and take a look, see if you want to actually go and contribute to it. Let's see. Michael says, are taxes due on April 15th in Greece? No. I think it's more like June. I can't remember exactly when. But yeah, it's a complication because I have to do an extension for my American taxes so I can do my Greek taxes first, and then I have to do American taxes also because America wants to take their cut. So yeah, it's complicated. Moving out of the country could be, if you're an American, moving out of the country can be a very rich and rewarding experience, but it could also be a major headache due to all the red tape that you have to go through and the fact that America, they'll let you go, but they don't really want you to be gone, and they're going to, make you do a lot of stuff like fill out lists of all your foreign bank accounts and make you pay taxes, etc. Of course, you don't have to pay taxes. There's a treaty involved where you don't have to pay taxes in both countries under some certain dollar amount, which, obviously I'm not going to hit that. So that's okay, but it's annoying. I'll just say that. There are many, many headaches that come with moving to another country. Yeah, Zos the Goat Herd says the right thing in the chat. Fairly sure that one of the things that sets the USA apart, and not in a good way, is that citizens living overseas need to pay taxes while outside of the country. My wife, who's Greek, never had this problem being in America. So, they're just like, okay, you're not here, so why pay taxes? Well, that's not how it works. Alejandro asks in the chat, does the System Correctors Forum already support social accounts like Mastodon? You mean to federated login? No, we don't at the moment. I don't know exactly how to add that either. There may be a way I can set it up for This is a hosted instance of Discourse. I don't host it myself because I didn't want to have the headache of managing it. So I'll have to see if there's a way to set that up. All right. Osloy says, USA's cut of what? Your global income. You're not doing anything in the US, are you? Well, technically, System Crafters LLC is in the United States, but I'm moving that out. But yeah, it doesn't matter. Like if you're an American and you move to another country and you make income in that country, America still wants to know about it. Yes. Fun stuff. Yes. Do they really want you to be able to have freedom to go somewhere else? I don't know. But they do want that money. Peter says, I guess that's to cover the expenses of SEAL Team 6 when they have to come get you out of a pickle. No, they're not going to bother getting me out of anything. If I get myself embroiled in the international conflict, I'm sure they'll just leave me there. Okay. So there's really no other news this week. I had to go out of town. So I was kind of like not really on top of all the things happening in the world this week. I was, out of town with family. What else? Oh, yes, Libra Planet 2024. That is still coming. You should check it out if you have any interest in going. It's basically the free software conference that happens every year, put on by the Free Software Foundation. I'm giving a keynote presentation there this year, which is pretty cool. I just booked my flights and hotel there today, so I will actually be attending in person. I didn't procrastinate so long that I missed a chance to participate in person. So go check out the registration page for that. I think it's still open. Also, you can register online if you don't want to go in person, so you can see it online if you want to. If you are there in the Boston area, even if you don't attend the conference, I'm going to try to do some kind of little meetup either Friday or Saturday night while I'm there, because I will be getting there on Friday and I'll be there all Saturday and leaving on Sunday. So if you're in the area and want to meet up, probably find a coffee shop somewhere and meet up and chat about the same types of things we chat about here. Or I could just tell you about all the complexity of being an American living abroad and having to pay taxes. Osloy says, I wrote code to fill out my 1040. Anyone else? I don't know that I would trust my code to do my taxes for me. Taxes are way too complicated. Faye says, I don't know what a 1040 is. That's probably better for you. I'm sure there's an equivalent form in the country that you live in. All right. Let's get rid of those things. All right, so today I want to talk about something that is related to things we've been discussing recently. I've been talking about Guile a lot more. Guile is interesting just because it is, it's Scheme, first of all, but also it is the main language that you use to configure your system with GNU Geeks, and it has a lot of other really interesting use cases. But I think that Scheme is a fantastic programming language. It's minimal yet powerful and practical enough for both personal hacking and larger projects. And Guile is a great Scheme implementation with a lot of practical value, but I kind of wonder why more people don't use it. So like on a technical level, Guile is actually improving every year. I don't know if you've really been tracking the progress of Guile over time, but between Guile 2 and Guile 3, there's been major improvements in terms of execution speed, overall quality of the runtime and libraries, etc. So it is a very useful tool that a lot of people can get value out of. It has a lot of different use cases. Also, there's a ton of work going into the compiler right now, thanks to the efforts on Guile Hoot, which is the Scheme to WebAssembly compiler. They're adding some new sort of hook points into the compiler, basically to make it easier to compile to WebAssembly as a target. Also, in terms of the garbage collector, to make the garbage collector a lot more fast and robust, through a project called Whip It by Andy Wingo, who is basically the lead developer of Guile. That's not actually merged in yet, but it is something that has matured enough that I think that they're starting to look at how they can integrate it back into Guile. So there's a lot of work happening that's going to help Guile reach more platforms and run a lot more efficiently. So it's it is something that is improving technically every year, and that's for sure. However, there are some thoughts I have sort of in no particular order on how we can help Guile become a more compelling choice for programmers who want to try out Scheme for new projects. And I say that because, Guile isn't really chosen as like a first-class programming language to use for projects for a lot of people. People end up coming into contact with Guile either through GNU Geeks or through some program that has Guile as a possible scripting language, but I think that's probably less common. And you don't really see many projects promoted out in the world saying, hey, we use Guile Scheme for this. So I've got a few things that I wanted to discuss excuse me, ideas that I have, and also things I've discussed with other people over time about how we can improve the Guile ecosystem as a whole, maybe improve some parts of Guile itself. I'm saying all of this as someone who is not a member of the Guile development team. I have not followed Guile Devel very closely over the last few years. I don't know which of these things have already been discussed. So if you hear me talking about something that has been discussed at length before, I don't know that it's already been discussed. So tell me about it. If you know about it, please let me know, because I would like to kind of find some of these discussions that may have already happened and point people to them to continue the discussions, or maybe to provide some fresh perspectives, because I would like more people to get involved with the Guile ecosystem and even contributing to Guile itself. Hello to Dave in the chat, Dave Thompson, who's works at the Sprightly Institute on Guile Hoot. Dave says, Andy is being funded by NLNet to finish Whip It, which is awesome. That is some news that did come out recently. To basically finish the work on Whip It so that it can be integrated back into Guile. Whip It also is interesting because anybody could go take that GC implementation and roll it into their own Scheme implementation, which is something I thought about doing, because writing a GC, or writing an efficient GC, and when I say GC, I mean garbage collector, is a whole job in itself, and is not very easy, and it's very error prone as well, because you have to be very careful about how you're tracking active objects and references between objects. And then you start learning about things like ephemerons, and you're like, okay, I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. So yes, very important project that will help Guile immensely, I think. Let me check the chat really quick. Gunn says 1040 is police radio code for run silent. Okay, yes. Alejandro says in the chat, the greater limitation I see on Guile is that it doesn't compile to platform binary executable. I think that I'm going to talk about that at some point. Okay, cool. So first of all, better developer tools. If you have used a programming language, any other relatively popular programming language, there's a number of things that are common for making the developer experience really good. And when I say developer experience, I mean the actual experience of writing code in the language and also building applications in the language. So things like editor, integration and tooling, and unit testing frameworks, linters, debugging tools, performance measurement tools, probably a lot more things that I could find if people want to suggest in the chat. But anyway, the point being, there's a lot of things that aren't really in Guile. Like I think there's profiling support inside of Guile that you could use, which can work fine. Debugging tools, there's a debugger in Guile. There's also GDB, which can do some Guile debugging to some degree. However, from what I've been hearing from people who've been going through the Guile course, the debugger experience isn't really straightforward. Maybe if you haven't ever used like a Lisp or Scheme style debugger before, and the documentation is a little bit technical, so it's hard to sort of get a grasp of that as a beginner. But I think when it comes to a Lisp or a Scheme, usually the debugging tools are all sort of built in. So in this case, it would be more of a improvement of the existing stuff that's in the language runtime itself. Also in terms of performance measurement tools. Linters, I mean, I don't really know how often linters are useful for Lisps, but it couldn't hurt to have linters. There may already be Guile linters that I don't know about. There may be schemed linters in general that I don't know about, but I think that having a schemed linter in general would only be relevant if you were writing code that followed the language specification very closely, and most scheme implementations don't follow the language specification very closely. They have extensions of their own, so it's hard to have a standardized set of idioms to follow to do linting on. Let's see, T mentions in the chat good compiler errors. Actually, that needs to be its own entire thing, because I feel like the compiler errors in Guile are not so good. And Nicolas says LSP. The thing about LSP when it comes to Lisps is that certainly it could be useful, but the LSP model is more geared towards languages that are not developed interactively at a REPL. Usually with the REPL development experience, you end up having code completions through some means, like Geyser, which is the IDE for Scheme and Emacs, has code completions through its own connection to the Guile REPL, or through the REPL of the individual Scheme implementation that it connects to, because it can use multiple Scheme implementations. So LSP gives a lot of functionality that isn't common, I think, for Lisp languages. However, there's probably pretty good common Lisp LSP implementations. I feel like I've seen maybe a Guile LSP implementation somewhere too. So I'm not saying that it's out of the realm of possibility, but it just hasn't been as common. What's more common is NREPL implementations that can hook into tools like Cider in Emacs, which is a closure development package, which uses NREPL. NREPL is kind of an asynchronous protocol for talking to an interactively running session of a Lisp language. I think it was developed primarily for closure, but then the sort of protocol could be used in other places. So Andrew Tropin, which I mentioned here, has been working on a project called RS, which is basically an NREPL implementation for Guile Scheme, and also the RE IDE package for Emacs, which is an IDE that hooks into the NREPL implementation. So if you want something that's like LSP that is more kind of Lisp focused, I think that this is a good place to look. It's still pretty early on in development, but I see some things happening recently in that project that point to better editor integration coming down the pike. Is that the right term? So if you're interested in seeing a better IDE than Geyser in Emacs, then definitely take a look at Andrew's project. And contribute to it if you try to use it. That's very important. We need more people contributing to these projects to make sure that they can grow faster and get the functionality that everyone needs. Geyser, I feel like Geyser does a good job of providing an integrated development experience for Scheme inside of Emacs, but it's not the best experience, and also doesn't feel very modern. You don't have things like code navigation, at least for Guile code, or automatic formatting, or like good quality code completions. It has code completions. It has things like, the echo area, the documentation message shows up in the echo area for a given procedure or binding, I guess. But it could be a lot better. And I think that an NREPL implementation like Andrew's project could be one way to get there. However, LSP could be another way to get there too. So I'm interested to see if other people would be preferring an LSP-driven approach. LSP obviously would give the widest reach to other editors. Like if you want to edit Scheme in VS Code for some reason, or NeoVim or something else, having a language server protocol implementation for Guile Scheme would make it much easier to just open up a file and start working on it. But it doesn't necessarily imply that you would have REPL functionality built in, because there's nothing for interactive evaluation, as far as I know, in the language server protocol. So it's just, various different things to consider, because Lisps are often handled differently in editors when it comes to development functionality. All right, let's see. Let me scroll up a little bit in the chat. Borosio says, Guile Emacs coming soon. No, not likely. Maybe as an E-list package. Well, what Guile Emacs was supposed to do is re-implement Emacs in Scheme, and then because Guile has the ability to execute code from different languages, it has a compiler front end for Emacs Lisp, which is not really like 100% equivalent because Scheme semantics are different. But I think even right now, you can run Emacs Lisp to some degree in the Guile Scheme interpreter. So it's not like you can't just like type Emacs Lisp in. I think there's like a compiler flag, or sorry, a command line flag you have to use, or some other way to invoke it. But Guile does have the ability to run Emacs Lisp. And I think the idea was that eventually Emacs could be redone in Guile. But that's a big project. And without like a bunch of people really getting excited about it, I don't think it could work. Frankly, I think that if someone were to try to do that, they shouldn't try to just re-implement Emacs. They should try to do it like not entirely clean room, but maybe clean room. When I say clean room, I mean like from scratch, doing things in a scheme-oriented way and not trying to just basically re-implement everything that was done the same way Emacs did. But that's just my opinion. Let's see. Fade says eLisp really wants to be Common Lisp. Yeah, it's definitely closest to Common Lisp. SLS in the YouTube chat says, by the way, opinion on Lem. I have not tried it. Certainly a good idea to try to have a Common Lisp-based editor, but I have not tried it. I know that Gavin Freeborn has made at least one video on his channel about it. So if you want an opinion from someone who's used it, maybe check out Gavin Freeborn's channel. Let's see. Someone also mentioned, maybe it was Nikolaus mentioned, oh no, it was Michael who mentioned, does Guile have a tree sitter implementation? There is one for Scheme in general. And since Scheme has a pretty regular syntax, regular meaning like there's not a lot of extra stuff that you find in Scheme code, even across implementations, because it's just S expressions for the most part. It's okay, I'm not going to say fairly straightforward. It is conceivable that you could have a single Scheme tree sitter implementation that would work across most Lisps most of the time. Sorry, most schemes most of the time. Data Monoid says, another cool thing is the upcoming Scheme plugin system for Helix. What's that? I mean, I know what Helix is, but I've never heard about a Scheme plugin system. Let's see. Peter says, where does this start? In Emacs, it's not a problem in my opinion, but for VS Code and Vim peeps, I assume it can do introspection in the running instance. I don't know which one we're talking about in this case. You mean Guile? Can you do introspection? You can do introspection in Guile. Yeah, you can do that. It's not, there's not like an interactive experience outside of the REPL like you would have in Emacs, but you could probably implement that. Okay. Cool. So better developer tools. There's stuff out there for some of these things. I mean, we could go look for them right now. I don't really want to spend a lot of time on that because there's a lot more things I want to talk about. But if you're interested in developer tools in general and you want an ecosystem that desperately needs better developer tools and you want like projects to work on and contribute to, consider looking into what you could do for Guile. If you've never used Guile before and you're a programmer that has used other language ecosystems, if you sit down and try to use Guile for an hour, you're quickly going to think of probably about 10 things that you could add to it. So certainly consider that if you want some projects to work on, because there's plenty that you could do. There are unit testing frameworks. There's a unit testing framework built into Guile already through, I think I want to say a Surfy 39. Is it? No. Surfy test assert Okay, Surfy 64. So Surfy 64, and a Surfy is basically like an RFC for extension functionality to Scheme. Some implementations implement some of these Surfies, and there's like over 100 of them, maybe multiple hundreds of them. So there's many of these things, and you shouldn't assume that the Scheme implementation that you use is going to implement any of these. As Dave says in the chat, it's okay, not great. Yeah, it's not great, but it gets the job done. I mean, like for something that's built into Guile, is a good starting point. However, there is Guile Proba, which I don't know the right way to pronounce that, but basically it is a kind of more familiar unit testing suite. Okay, testing tools for Surfy 64 base test suites. I think it's better. Maybe it just improves on what's already there. And it's a command line interface. So it's like a test harness basically for Surfy 64 tests. Anyway, there's certainly room for other people to come in and write their own libraries for that. And there may be others, but honestly, here's my opinion on things already existing. You should never be deterred by something already existing. Yes, people will tell you, don't reinvent the wheel, don't write the same thing when there's already something else out there. But if you have a different perspective on how to implement something, just do it anyway, because you're gonna learn from it and it might be fun. And then eventually you'll be like, okay, well, that was cool, but maybe I'll just use the thing that already exists because it's easier, it's already there. And I now know how I might contribute to that project because I learned a lot from doing it myself. So go ahead and do it anyway. Write a Scheme linter if you want to. Just do it because you'll learn a lot. So that's my short little spiel on doing it anyway. Better compiler errors. I wish I had a good example of this right now, but Guile's compiler errors are very cryptic looking. They include a lot of kind of inner library stack trace stuff that is confusing and maybe misleading at times. And I kind of wish there was a cleaner representation for errors. Maybe somebody's already started working on that in Guile Devel and I just haven't seen it. But definitely it would be nicer if the stack traces were a bit more user-friendly when you first see them, but then maybe there could be another command that would give you all that extra information if you really wanted to see it. Because a lot of times when you get a Guile stack trace, first of all, the order of it, I think, is reversed compared to what you would normally expect to see in a stack trace. Normally, you would expect to see your function call at the top, but I think in Guile, it's the opposite, it's at the bottom. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I just remember being a little bit confused sometimes whenever I'm looking at Guile stack traces, but it's a little bit too technical. And one thing I hear about Guile and the Guile manual is that it's very technical. I think it should be less technical if you want people to be using it as like a hacking language, because you don't want people to be Scheme experts to have to, or compiler experts even to be able to use your tooling. So one pretty obvious place where new people are going to bump up against immediately when they start using your language is the errors, because they're going to make a mistake pretty fast, trying things out. So you really need to have better compiler errors. This is a must for helping new people become comfortable using the language and tools. So thank you to T in the YouTube chat for pointing this out. It definitely needs to be improved. Now, how would one go about doing that? Well, first of all, what I would do is, if you understand how compilers work and how runtimes work, and you can kind of like go do this kind of work, definitely consider just cloning down the Guile source and try to like hack together a better looking stack trace. Don't worry about whether people will agree to having it yet. Just start working on it and see if you can come up with something that's a bit more user friendly. Then go to social media like Mastodon, let's say, Fediverse, and just go send a screenshot. Hey, I've been working on improved Guile stack traces. Here's what it looks like. What do you think? And get some feedback from people. That way you can kind of see what people are really looking for. I would do this before going to Guile Devel to talk to people about it there, because, maybe people have already discussed this a bunch of times. You don't want to be discouraged from the sort of knee-jerk reaction to new efforts on this. I don't know if there will be. I'm sort of giving advice as a person who's contributed to open source and free software projects before, just on how maybe you could make such an improvement and then kind of socialize it to get people on board, and then bring it as a patch into the project. So it's a very worthwhile thing. You will be helping many people by trying to improve the compiler errors and stack traces for Guile. It also goes into the debugging experience as a whole to make debugging a bit more user-friendly, because the stack trace is kind of like the primary thing you're looking at when you start debugging. When you hit an error, you see the stack trace. And for those of you who don't know what a stack trace is, it's basically the list of all functions that have been called up to the point where the program ran into an error. So when your program starts, some function gets called, and then it calls more functions that call other functions, and you end up with this long list of functions that end up at the current point where the error occurred. And that is the stack trace. It's the stack. So whenever a program stops on an error, usually it displays this stack trace to you, the stack to you, so that you can kind of see where the program went to end up at this point where the error occurred. And then a debugger will give you the ability to jump to different points in that current call stack to inspect the variables or the function parameters or anything else like that. You can kind of look at the environment in terms of what was happening at that moment in time. So the stack trace is like the first thing you see. So if it's better, if someone can look at it and understand what they're looking at, then it makes their debugging experience easier. So huge improvement that could be made there, I think. Borusio says, a stack trace is the star of a debugging party. Yes. And if you don't have stack traces, then you have to scratch your head a lot, which is what I was doing with my own language, my own scheme implementation mesh, while working on many game jams with the language while it was sort of half-baked, which it still is half-baked, but it was more half-baked then. All right. So definitely look into improving compiler errors. The next thing would be an improved manual. So there's a lot of information in the Guile manual. If we pull it up right now, let's see, what is it? Control HR? No, Control HR. Yes, Guile. Okay. So I actually found this to be a little bit confusing whenever I started trying to learn Guile itself. There's a lot of information here, but the top level nodes in the manual don't really seem to point you in the right direction. And that's my opinion. I don't really know if other people have had a better experience with it than me. There's a hello Guile, but you know, it kind of just tells you how to run Guile without really telling you much about Scheme itself. Okay, Hello Scheme. I think Hello Scheme maybe should come first, but I don't know. It does have kind of a primer on Scheme. Some of the stuff like latent typing is great to have that information, but I feel like a new user who's never seen Scheme before and maybe doesn't have a lot of experience with other languages has no idea what latent typing is. And that might be a barrier to someone actually learning the language, because Guile is the first place they look to try to learn Scheme. Let's see, procedures as values. Sure, that's certainly useful, but maybe just sort of the angle at which some of this stuff is approached could be a bit more friendly. But I guess that then goes back to what is the purpose of a manual? Is the purpose of a manual to teach someone the language, or is that the purpose of some other reference material like a book about the language? Because so like the Rust ecosystem has the Rust manual and the Rust book, I guess. That's kind of like the official book to teach the language. So maybe there's a different book needed for teaching people Scheme in the context of Guile. But still, I think that leaning heavily on technical language regarding Scheme and compilers could be a little bit off-putting for new people. So it could be a little bit challenging for people to get started using Guile. Let's see, programming in Scheme. Guile's implementation of Scheme. Sure, that's not bad. Invoking Guile scripting. I don't know. I think what I feel like I'm missing is what is the getting started tutorial for how to write a basic application with Guile. How does someone think about writing a basic application or script in Guile? I feel like you need to have that kind of walkthrough early on in a manual to set context in someone's head, especially if someone already has context of programming languages and they want like a quick way to attach their existing knowledge to the new information that you're giving them. So if you quickly show them kind of like a walkthrough of how you would get started writing an application, then an experienced person will be like, okay, I know what to do. For a person who doesn't yet know, then they get to benefit from seeing what a real world minimal project startups looks like, so that they kind of have a pattern to follow whenever they start writing code. So I think that there is an opportunity to provide something like this in the Guile manual, but people may say that should be the role of some other document. So I don't really know. Like, I'm certainly curious to hear people's feedback on that, either here in the stream or in the comments after or anywhere else. But you know, the main manual is going to be the place where a lot of people start when they start learning your language. So you need to have something there that they can get started quickly with and then know where to go next. You need pointers to the other parts of the manual that explain other concepts in depth, because there's plenty of depth in this manual. If you go looking like more deeply, you'll start to see, you know, details about how record types are implemented using v-structs and things of that nature, or v-cells. Anyway, there's all kinds of like cool compiler knowledge information in the Guile manual, but most people don't need that, and they don't really want to hear it. Or if they hear it, they're going to get confused and think that they need to know all this stuff. Better to just keep them in a more well-manicured path to start with, so that they get a lot of value out of the initial information, and then give them pointers to the more advanced stuff when they want to see it. All right, let me check the chat. SLS says, just my 2 cents as a beginner, found importing code from other files difficult to understand and debug. Yeah, I don't know if that's just like a Lisp thing, because Lisps typically have the concept of a load path and how imports work, but it does need to be explained well. I feel like I saw that somewhere. Where is it? Using the Guile module system, using modules. Yeah, it doesn't really tell you much. Definitely needs to be explained. Let's see, what else can we see here? Alejandro says, if the Guile manual gets improved, geeks in general will improve a lot. I agree with that too. One's ability to become effective with geeks is directly tied to their ability to become effective with Guile. And if they can't learn Guile very easily, or if they are resorting to copying and pasting things from other people's configurations or from the manual, then they're not going to get the real benefit of geeks, which is the ability to write code that can streamline your configuration, or automate certain parts of your configuration, or even write their own service implementations or package definitions, etc. So yes, Guile's manual has a direct impact on the adoption of geeks. So it all is connected for sure. SLS says, as an absolute beginner resource, Exorcism might also be good. I haven't looked at that. I'm kind of surprised if they have Guile in there. Antler says, I get better error messages if I take pains to ensure the modules are compiled in dependency order via the TUP build system. I've not heard of that. Is that Guile? Oh, okay, so it's like a general build system. Okay, have not heard of that. Data Monoid says, I think the biggest barrier that I've heard when it comes to Geeks adoption is unfree packages. That's only for installing Geeks. Then day-to-day usage, you have to learn Guile to be effective with Geeks. Let's see. Oslo says, if there were more Guile Lambos akin to the PHP Lambos, what is a Lambo aside from a Lamborghini? That would help too. Okay. Let's see. Barosio says, maybe a Guile Geeks manual will be useful for both, since Guile will have a direct value reflected on it and Geeks will be better understood. Maybe. if there were more Guile Lambos, you mean like people who bought a Lambo because of their use of Guile, like they made so much money from Guile? Are people buying Lambos writing PHP? If that's the case, I'm quitting this channel tomorrow and going to write PHP. Just kidding. All right, so where was I? This has a direct impact on the adoption of not only Guile, but Geeks as well. All right. The next thing I would say is a cross-platform dependency manager. So obviously Geeks is not cross-platform, but it is the best Guile package manager and build tool. Geeks, because Geeks is written with Guile, and because Geeks is a package manager and a tool for delivering software through containers or packages or whatever, it's a great tool for developing Guile applications. And I would say it is the best place to find Guile library packages out of any distribution of Linux, because it's easy for a Guile developer to add their package to Geeks. It's not as easy to add it on Debian or Arch Linux, whatever you want to call it, Alpine, whatever. I mean, you could do it in those places, but it's not like a Guile-friendly, they're not Guile-friendly distros like Geeks is. So because Geeks is the best place for getting Guile packages, and Geeks is not run cross-platform, you can't use it on Windows without Windows Subsystem for Linux, which is not native Windows really. It's Linux and Windows. And then it's not on Mac OS either. If someone wants to develop a cross-platform Guile application that can run on those other platforms, then they have to resort to something else for getting their dependencies for their project and building the project. Dave says, I will die on the hill that not having a language-specific package manager is a feature. Well, the thing is, it's kind of become an expectation for there to be a tool for a language to easily get all the dependencies for that project in that language and build the project, basically. It is nice that you can go and install packages like Guile JSON or other Guile libraries in Debian as system packages. There are benefits to that, which, like, let's say one benefit would be because people are maintaining those packages, any distro-specific issues can easily be worked out, like maybe different versions of libraries or things like that. A package manager that works across platforms can't do that quite as easily, because then it has to do a lot of like platform or distro-specific checks for different versions of libraries, etc. But still, it feels like there's something missing there. Dave says Guile Homebrew is very good for Guile on Mac OS. Yes, but the thing is, like, is it better or worse whenever you have to tell people 15 different ways to install the dependencies for a given platform, and maybe those dependencies aren't even there? So I'm not talking necessarily about, you know, making yet another package manager per se. I'm more talking about just being able to source dependencies for a project, which could be from the distro-specific packages, or it could be just cloning Git repositories. So this could be something that it doesn't really apply to Guile based on the way that Guile sort of operates. Guile is sort of native to the Linux ecosystem, meaning that there are many different distributions, and if you want software on a given distribution, the traditional way to do that is to create a package for the distribution for the software that you're trying to distribute. But that does mean that across distributions, there is an uneven availability of various libraries or programs. So for Guile, if there's a library that you want to use, like let's say Guile IRC, which is not very common, you may not find it on most, if not all, of the distributions. So you either have to do like a Git submodule inside your Git repository for the project to clone that down and use it, which I suppose is okay. Or you have to go to the trouble to have someone or do it yourself package up that Guile library and submit that to the various distributions where you expect someone to try to build your program, and then wait and then deal with any issues which come from trying to get your package to be accepted. So there are definitely pros and cons to both sides. I feel like I personally don't want to depend on distro package managers. I would much rather pull down Git repositories using tags for versions, not necessarily pulling down the latest commit, because that's super unreliable. If you've ever used a package off Melpa and you update your packages and now everything's broken, that's because Melpa is just pulling the latest from every Git repository. If you don't use Melpa stable, in Emacs I'm talking about. So a sane approach to pulling Guile libraries from Git repositories would be nice. Now, that only works for Guile native libraries that are all written in Guile, that don't have any native components. Sometimes a Guile library will have native components because it needs to talk to C libraries directly, or things like that. It's pretty common. So for that, you would have to have a way to build those native components, which either means like having to ensure that there is a C++ or GCC or Clang toolchain on the machine, which is a headache in itself. And that right there, hell begins, where you have to start shelling out to a C compiler toolchain on any given platform, because then you have to make sure that the user knows how to get it installed. You definitely don't want to install it for them. The solution that Zig, the programming language Zig, has is basically just to bundle Clang with the Zig compiler, which simplifies things, but now the compiler is huge. So anyway, for certain types of libraries, a cross-platform dependency manager could be pretty useful if you have Guile-only libraries. But native components definitely make things complicated. However, I think somebody should try this again. There was a project called Guildhall File Guile, which provided a package manager for Guile. I think there may be a newer location where the repos exist on this. This is defunct. I don't think that anybody uses this anymore, if I'm not mistaken. I think Dave may have contributed somewhat to some of this stuff in the past. Actually, this is Dave's package that was set up in the Guildhall GitHub organization. But I think it's not really being used anymore. Guildhall was a solution for this, but it is no longer used. I'm quite sure it's no longer used. Someone could correct me on that. Perhaps something more lightweight could be created. I don't know. Dave says, I don't think I ever contributed. Okay. Fair enough. So anyway, that's something to consider. Obviously, there will be mixed opinions on whether something like that is feasible or useful, but I kind of think that it should be reconsidered in the context of, what modern developer tooling looks like. That is not to say that modern developer tooling is ideal, though. If it turns out that it is objectively better to use distribution-specific package managers or just platform-specific package managers like Homebrew in macOS and whatever people use, like Chocolatey on Windows, I guess. I don't really see a lot of Guile stuff in Windows. Usually in Windows, you'll see people using MSys2, but there aren't very many Guile libraries in MSys2, aside from Guile itself. And that also goes to the next item, which we'll talk about in a second. But that might be an area where someone should go investigate whether a cross-platform tool is needed. So if you want to look into something like this, it would certainly be useful to the community, I think, to come up with the pros and cons of writing a cross-platform tool, or at least looking at Guildhall and how it works and seeing if it could be revived or if maybe the model is flawed. I don't know. And if you figure out that the platform native package manager solution is better, we probably need to have documentation for Guile on how to write applications that are cross-platform. Because right now I don't really feel like that's the case, and people sort of have to figure it out themselves, especially on Windows, which doesn't have really good Guile support. So the next thing we're going to talk about is better Windows support. Guile is available on Windows through MSys2. Guile MSys2. MSys2, if you didn't know about it, is a tool chain to bring the GNU ecosystem to Windows. So GCC, obviously, making GCC work on Windows, or Git, or a lot of other stuff like shell environments or shell tools like core utils, etc., things like that. Building them so that they can actually be native Windows applications, but they still are interacting with the environment as if it was a Unix/Linux system. So Guile is compiled to work on Windows. It's version 3.0.9, which is probably pretty. Wait, let me get my mouth to work with my brain. It is one of the more recent releases of Guile. So it is available. However, I think certain things don't work very well with Guile on Windows. You may be able to start up a simple REPL, but if you start trying to use some of the more useful Guile functionality, things start to fall over. Maybe you get seg faults, maybe errors of certain kinds. So there's been some thread on Guile Develop for a while now about trying to improve Windows support for Guile, and I don't really think it's made a whole lot of progress. I think someone was working on that, but I don't know kind of where it ended up. If you want to be able to write Guile apps that work on multiple platforms, like for instance, if you want to use Guile for game development, which is very doable considering all the libraries that exist for graphics and game development in Guile, which Dave Thompson here has written many of them. If you wanted to write a game that worked cross-platform, then Windows is kind of out right now, unless you're writing using Guile Hoot, which is for the browser. So I think it's worthwhile. Like if people really want to like invest in Guile as a platform for developing applications, you really do need Windows support. Dave says there's some promising patches for Windows 10 in the past week. So if that's the case, that's great. It's very good if there are recent patches. Let's actually check out Guile Devel and see what we can see on that. Let's see, date, Windows support. Yes, well, here's a thread here. Okay, so JIT was not working. So just-in-time compilation was not working on 64-bit MingW, but apparently there's a fix for that. So cool. If that does work, then that's great. Then maybe that kind of brings Windows support somewhat back online. Excellent. So this may be improving soon, but there is probably more work to do to ensure that cross-platform applications work well on Windows, including using Guile libraries, community Guile libraries, let's say. Okay. So Windows support will definitely be needed if you want to have cross-platform apps. I really think that people should try to make cross-platform applications. I mean, I think that many people wouldn't use Emacs if it wasn't on Windows. Now, the Windows build of Emacs is not very good because of the concessions that must be made to make something like Emacs work well on Windows, usually through the MSys2 tool chain. Like there's certain things that are kind of low level that cause it to be slower whenever shelling out to processes and reading information from programs. But being able to provide Windows support for a program, especially a game, is good to have. So it's something that needs to be done. macOS support is pretty good for Guile. I haven't really used it personally, but Alex Concilio Flaque, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, I think is managing or maintaining many of the Guile packages on Homebrew, and you can get a lot of decent stuff there, and the latest Guile as well. So if you're using macOS, then you can definitely do some Guile hacking. Let me check the chat real quick. SLS says, it might help to have a package manager and better Windows support, but is this also how Guile can reach more popularity? Could argue that instead focus on being the best in one area. Well, being the best in one area. I mean, like, which area is Rust the best in? Only necessarily in, I guess, there's two things that Rust is good at. One is memory safety because of the compiler, and two is the ecosystem because of cargo. But you can write all kinds of apps with Rust. It's not better for one type of app. So I don't really think that we should say that Guile should be good at one specific thing. Unless you want to say something like, you know, personal project hacking, interactive development, hackable applications, that sort of thing. I mean, sure, that's good, but that's also general. It could be any kind of application. Henrique says, can one create a cross-platform application in Guile by embedding it in a C application via libguile? Yes, but that's basically the same as just compiling the Guile executable and running applications that way. You're limited by the same platform support that Guile itself has. All right, let's check the other chat. Shom says, MSys2 was clutch before WSL2. Still very handy, even though WSL isn't, even when it's not an option. Yeah, WSL sort of obviates the need for running certain kinds of applications natively in Windows because it's good enough to do graphical applications without really any extra configuration. For instance, recently, I was on a Windows machine. I installed the Alpine Linux image of WSL2, and I got Emacs, the PGTK version of Emacs running in there with high DPI text rendering and everything through Wayland without having to set anything else extra up. I just installed the Alpine image. I installed everything needed to run Emacs, and I ran Emacs, and I installed some extra fonts and stuff, and I think it basically just worked. And I think that's the case for a lot of applications now. So if you have a Wayland app or even an Xorg app, you can just run it from WSL2 and it will pop up as a window in Windows. You don't have to like have a fake desktop environment or anything. You can just run apps natively. So I feel like WSL2 changes the game a little bit. In that case, you can do all kinds of Guile Scheme development on Windows. But I don't know how well games work on that layer. You know, maybe it's better to be able to write games natively, but it really just depends on the kind of application you're trying to write. Temp Crap says, we need a good tutorial to start getting into contributing to GNU. Anyone? How do I navigate mailing lists? What about pushing commits? There is, what is it called? Get email. What's it called? What's Drew DeVault's website called? No. Get email DeVault. What is the website called? Get-send-email.io. Get-send-email.io. I mean, this helps you with part of the thing, I think. Like, how do you send patches to a mailing list? But yeah, I mean, I guess like the bigger question is how do you contribute to a project that is done via mailing lists? So there may be resources for that already. I don't really know. But it doesn't hurt to have that. All right, Windows support. I think I've covered that well enough. Standardized Guile library documentation. You could say that, you know, info, text info, tech info, etc. could be considered a solution for this. But is there a good way to generate Guile library documentation directly from the source? There may be a solution for this already. I don't actually know. If somebody can point it out, that'd be useful. But what I think is other language ecosystems, like let's say Rust. I keep pointing to Rust because their tooling is generally pretty good for things like this. You can easily generate a documentation site effectively from a Rust library if you annotate your functions, classes, modules, etc. in a certain way. So if something like this exists for Guiles or did exist for Guile, you could have a consistent documentation format that could be useful for people to get ramped up with a new library quickly. Instead of having to go figure out where the website is for a given library, maybe there could be a centralized website like, what is it called? dev.rs? No. I'm glad that wasn't a porn site. Rust dev rs. What is the site that I'm looking for? Somebody in the chat probably knows which one it is. Rust library documentation. There's a site for this that automatically gets generated based on the latest releases of Rust libraries. docs.rs. There we go. Good. So you can click on any library and it's not a library. Okay, fine. Show me some docs on something. What's it called? Serde. Okay, intro doesn't work. There we go. Cool. Serde. It's a framework for serializing and deserializing Rust data structures. So all this is generated, I'm pretty sure, from source. In fact, if I go click source here, if my mouse cooperates with me, this is from lib.rs inside of the Serde library. And they've got basically embedded markdown. It doesn't have to be embedded markdown for Guile. It could be something else, sort of like what Emacs Lisp has. But being able to generate documentation, which obviously this may not be perfect for various different reasons, but having a standardized way to document Guile libraries that you could have a central website where someone could go look at all the Guile libraries and the documentation for all the latest versions of those libraries could be very useful, I think, for people to learn the ecosystem and figure out what libraries are available. Even cross-linking between libraries could be pretty interesting for, like, if you have like a web API library and you want to link to Guile JSON, maybe a specific function in Guile JSON, you could somehow have some syntax for linking between them, and then that could be represented in such a website. However, one could say having a centralized documentation website is a code smell of some sort, or a bad pattern or bad practice. That's also fine. If someone could go generate their own website using their own styling or whatever, using this, I mean, probably the best solution would be like generating tech info directly from Guile code, which Geeks may do something for that already. Maybe I'm missing that, but that could be useful. Someone can look into that and maybe find a good solution for it, I think. Does Geeks have a solution for this already? There could be a centralized documentation site for Guile libraries like Rust's own docs.rs. Dave says Guile has some text info integration. Okay, cool. Let's see. Guile text info. Tech info. Don't catch me slipping. Okay. Parses tech info into SXML. What I've wanted to do is use Guile's tech info parser to write a new HTML export for Guile project. It looks really good and has good navigation. Yes, Dave, that's basically what I'm talking about. So Dave is going to do it for us. Great. Excellent. Problem solved. Let's just check that one off the list. No, just kidding. If you're interested in working on something like that, go ping Dave, because apparently Dave has ideas on how that can be done. And maybe you could be directed by Dave to help in a meaningful way on something like that. More community libraries. I mean, that can't hurt, right? Cover more interesting use cases. We went and looked at, Dave says, did I accidentally volunteer? No, I promise I will help get someone to help you instead of you doing it yourself. We went through like the whole listing of Guile libraries, I don't know, 2 months ago on the stream. Dave's in his wood shop. Okay, Dave, please stop typing on your phone while trying to cut wood at the same time, because I don't want you to lose any of your very important digits that make money for your family. We looked at a bunch of Guile libraries on the Guile website. There's a lot of stuff there, a lot of really interesting stuff, a lot of scientific stuff, mathematical stuff. We need some more like rubber meets the road kind of libraries, I think. Other ecosystems have common libraries for different application development patterns, UI libraries, etc. You see a lot of stuff in Guile for like interacting directly with GTK or glib, etc. So that's there, but there needs to be like a level of abstraction above that, I think, where maybe there's an easier way to write UI applications with Guile in a more scheme-ish type of form, maybe. I don't know. I'm just sort of like making shit up as I'm talking here. But that's UI applications. There's also web applications. There aren't very many good web application frameworks for Scheme, or for Guile specifically. There are tools around, there's various libraries around that have bits and pieces of things that are useful. There's also GNU Artanis, which is like a sort of end-to-end library, but it does things a very specific and opinionated way. It's kind of like a Ruby on Rails for Guile type thing. Personally, I don't really want that because I want something a little bit more minimal that I can put pieces together where I need to. I think there's a big opportunity for Guile Scheme to have libraries for building both web applications and web APIs. There's also an opportunity to do some cool stuff with making browser application UI with Guile Hoot. Dave has been doing some experimentation on that front to do like a React style shadow DOM efficient UI update with a functional style, basically. So that kind of thing is possible. And when Hoot continues to mature and the patterns for bringing in Hoot libraries starts to bake, there'll be a lot of opportunities there as well to do like a React style thing, or even like if you've used Clojure before and you've used libraries like Reframe, or what were the other ones? Reagent, stuff like that. I can't remember the names. Anyway, libraries like that, like the path is completely open for people to go and write cool stuff like that for Hoot. Game development, Dave has it pretty well covered already, but why not have more game development libraries? Or, they could have, somebody could write a Vulkan 3D graphics interface for Guile. I don't know who'd want to do that because Vulkan is kind of a nightmare, but you could do that. And in other kinds of applications as well. Like there's plenty of stuff that you could write libraries for to make things useful for other people. So this is where the biggest number of people could actually help. Like if you want to use Guile to do some kind of cool application, write your code and then figure out which parts of your code could be made into a reusable library that someone else could benefit from to write a similar type of application. This is a very fun and effective way, I think, to contribute to the overall ecosystem. Dave says, yeah, make more game stuff. I can't do it all. Or contribute to Chickadee and Catbird and Guile SDL2 and some other related libraries. I mean, those are certainly good places to contribute as well. So definitely more community libraries are needed to flesh out the ecosystem. Guile libraries. Let's see. I just want to link to that list and put it into the existing list of libraries. Another thing that's interesting could be provide FFI wrappers for important C libraries, like let's say FFmpeg or etc. I don't know, like other things that people might want to use that are like C libraries to do more advanced kind of work with Guile. Maybe there already is FFmpeg something here. No, there's not. So like that would be useful to me. I would love to have an FFmpeg library that I could use for like editing video and whatnot. And I may end up making my own at some point just because I need it. But any use case you could think of for writing an application or a script in Guile, there's an opportunity to come up with a library that helps with that. And also, if you've used really good libraries in other languages that solve a certain type of problem particularly well, you could try to reimagine that library in the context of Guile. Like, for instance, like application configuration or unit testing or any of the developer tool stuff that we mentioned before. Yeah, that sort of thing. So Or even like kind of like cross-platform helper functions, maybe. Like there's certain things that are not so straightforward to do across different platforms. Maybe you could have a library for that. So certainly worth looking into different cases you could cover for Guile libraries that aren't already covered. Or maybe they are covered. Maybe you could do it better. Who knows? Let's see. So Antler says, I've made libui bindings for Guile, and there's precedent from the Julia bindings to make them into a declarative SXML UI tree interface. That would be really cool, actually. Also, there's, excuse me, there's immediate mode UI stuff like Dear Image UI. I don't really know why it's called that. Let's see. Yes. Anyway, this is like an embedded C library, which would require native components. You basically embed this library into a C program or a library, and then you can do some user interfaces basically rendered in OpenGL. Now, obviously, this is kind of made as a debugging tool for graphical applications, but you can make pretty nice looking UIs with it. And the interesting thing about it is that it's not a thing where you create objects for the UI elements and you kind of manipulate those to render windows and controls on the screen. This is a model where every frame, the renderer calls your entry point function for rendering the current state of the UI. And based on what data you have active in your application, it sort of drives what UI elements are rendered every frame. So it's more of a kind of a functional UI system in its own right, but some people worry, which I also sort of worry, like the performance can be pretty bad on that. However, it's a cool model. You should, if you're into UI development, you should look at this because it's interesting. So yeah. Ankit says, recently I was trying to implement the CLI, but subcommand argument parsing was not very straightforward, and Guile having Go's Cobra-like library would be great. Yes, there is a library for that, I think. The built-in ICE9 opt-args it doesn't really solve that problem specifically. It solves a subset of the problem. You would have to do the subcommand dispatch yourself, but once you've dispatched to the handler for a given subcommand, then this thing could take care of the rest of it, I think. So, yeah, I think there's another library that might make this easier. But that's also another place where people could create their own library that has a nice pattern, like Ankit is suggesting here. If you want to have a command line interface command argument parser that is really nice to use, especially if you can integrate help strings and stuff with it. Alejandro says in the chat, a Guile library to implement org mode as an Emacs. Well, okay. Someone should implement an org mode parser for Guile. You know why? Because Haunt, the static site generator for Guile, could really use it. Because right now, Haunt cannot actually generate a website out of org mode files. It can do it from markdown files. It can do it from, is it Scribble or Scribbolo files, which are like, scheme syntax for HTML. And maybe some other forms, but it can't do org mode. And I've talked to Dave about this. There's some ideas on how to accomplish it, but if someone actually wrote a real org mode parser for Guile, then it would make the implementation in Haunt much, much easier. Which means that instead of using Emacs to publish your org-based website, you can use Guile to do that. However, for me as a person who uses org mode a lot for websites and uses and abuses the org publish system quite a lot, I mean, it's good enough for me. I would love to use Haunt, and I've actually started working on a few sites with it, but I never really published any of them. But yeah, if it supported org mode, I might consider using it. Okay. Ankit says, for org mode, I guess it's worth trying out built-in elist support in Guile. I mean, that's not a bad idea, actually. I hadn't thought about that, but I don't really know what that entails. Like, can you easily pull in Emacs Lisp code as an external module and have it work correctly? Antler says, I use haunt with org mode by running OX haunt in batch mode in my build process. Yeah, that can definitely work. That's cool. Let's see. And Dave says, Guile present has a starting point for an org parser. So let's see. Guile present may have a starting point for an org mode parser. And that is Guile present. Also, Dave pointed out in the chat that Geeks itself, the Geeks code base, has some good examples of command line argument parsing. If people are interested in that kind of thing, maybe you could even extract what's already in Geeks and make it a separate library that Geeks could possibly use. Okay, here's another one that has come up from time to time, and I think there may be reasons not to do this, but maybe we should consider aliasing ICE9 to Guile, because most people look at this ICE9 and it seems like something you shouldn't be using. I don't know, it just seems scary looking for some reason. And it may sound silly to say it looks scary looking, but really, like, I think that people see this and they don't know what the hell it is, and they're not sure if it actually is part of Guile or something else. As Dave has told us on another stream, ICE9 is kind of like a reference to, I think, Cat's Cradle, Kurt Vonnegut novel. There's some kind of ICE9 substance or something in that book that this is based on. The name is based on. But really, these are the set of standard libraries that come with Guile. I have seen a discussion on the Fediverse over the last few months with Christine Limmer-Weber, and I want to say Daphne Preston Kendall, if that's the right order of the last names, who is the current chair, I want to say, of the Scheme Standards Committee. I think that there is like a recommendation that Scheme implementation should not have a namespace with the Scheme implementation's name in it because of, I mean, the possibility that it could cause people to become too dependent on a specific implementation. I'm not exactly sure if that's true, but or if I'm remembering it correctly. But still, I think that there needs to be a better name for ICE9 because it's confusing. So this may not be possible due to Scheme standard naming conventions, but it would be nice if there was a more user-friendly name that made it obvious that these are standard libraries, or, you know, Guile, or, okay, Guile-specific libraries that are built in. Tim Crab says also Surfy, which is very confusing. Surfy makes a bit more sense because that is actually referring to a specific specification that's been written for the Scheme language. Because, like, we saw the Surfy site before, Scheme Surfy. These are the Scheme requests for implementation. There are many, many, many of these. Let's see, they're up to like 252 now, it seems. And Dave says in the chat, Hoot has a Hoot namespace. Well, that's a good point, actually. Maybe that sort of opens the door for Guile having its own. But anyway, Surfies are kind of... The idea in Scheme is that language extensions should be implemented by Surfies, and a Surfy is a specification for a certain type of behavior and a certain set of procedures and types that provide that behavior. So two different Scheme implementations could have their own implementation of a Surfy, but so long as it has the same module namespace, then code written against the R7RS standard, which is the most recent standard of Scheme, could import that same Surfy whatever namespace and get the same functionality, even though it's implemented separately for two different implementations of Scheme. So there is a reason for that. There's not as strong of a reason for ICE9. Antler says VV brought that up, if I recall. That might be right. That might be right. Let's see. Missing some things from this IRC chat, probably. Oh, there seems to be an org parser for Guile already. Is that right? Or is that Clojure? Oh, okay. Org parsing and Clojure could help with ideas. Yeah, Shom has a good point. There is a CLJ org. There are a couple of libraries for org parsing in Clojure. So that could be a starting point for anybody wanting to write an org parser for Guile. Okay, streamlined application development. I guess, okay, last thing on the iSign to Guile thing. I think that this should be done, but it also should be done in a way that doesn't break existing code. So aliasing the name iSign to something else would be good. I mean, if more people start asking for that on Guile Devel, maybe there's more of a chance it will actually happen. So maybe it's just a thing that people need to start doing to kind of push that conversation along. Streamlined application deployment. So let me see. How would I characterize this? I mean, right now, you can package a Guile application using Geeks Pack, I think is the right command for that. Let me check that real quick. Geeks Pack help. Yeah, so Geeks Pack is a command that will create a bundle of a given program. If you have a Geeks package definition, you can run Geeks Pack, and what it will do is take all of the store folders from the GNU store path for all the libraries and everything, and then like fix all the paths inside of them and dump it into one folder where you have the executable entry point for your program, and then it has all of the libraries and things that are needed kind of self-contained. However, it results in like a massive folder because it's got all this stuff in it. It would work cross-platform on, cross-distribution in Linuxes, I think, because a lot of the stuff is already provided. I don't know that you can cross-compile a program to Windows, because there is some Windows cross-compilation support in Geeks for certain C programs, but I don't know that you can just like make a Windows program with Geeks Pack that targets, a program that targets Windows. Same thing for Mac OS. I'm not exactly sure that's possible. I would say it's less likely for Mac OS, but I could be wrong about that. But anyway, but this really only works on Linuxes. What about Windows or Mac OS? I mean, this also goes back to like cross-platform dependency management support. But there's also another way to think about this, which is there a way to create statically linked applications, Guile applications, containing pre-compiled scheme code .go files? So if there was a way to create statically linked, or at least maybe not fully statically linked, maybe not fully statically linked, there could be dynamic C libraries, but the Guile code would all be linked in one app, one program. If you could do that, then it can be easier to distribute a Guile application cross-platform. Leroy says Guile code cannot be compiled to an executable binary, right? Well, it can, because you can compile a C application using libguile, possibly even statically linked, but that could be a problem for certain things with Guile. I'm not exactly sure if statically linked works to make an application that contains Guile. But can you, oh crap. But can you embed .go files in it? So that's kind of what I'm thinking. Like, let's say you're a game developer and you want to develop a game in Guile that you distribute to other people to run on their system. You don't necessarily want to give them the Guile interpreter, a bunch of .scm files, and then your game assets. What you want to give them is a single program, and then that folder containing your assets, or maybe just a bundle that, like a zip file or something that it can open and read. Is it possible to distribute a Guile application like that today? I don't know. This is something that I hope somebody can go and look into and report back on, maybe write a blog post about it or share it on the System Crackers forum. But I think that providing a way to easily create a precompiled Guile application that you can distribute on a given platform, like a Windows app or an app on Mac OS, would go a long way to making it easier to develop applications that could be distributed cross-platform. I used Gambit Scheme for a long time. Okay, not a long time. It was a year, I think. But I was actually producing a couple of different games that I haven't really released, but they were games that were compiled to Linux, Windows, and Mac OS. All the code was embedded inside the program. You just get the exe file, and then maybe you have to have the certain libraries installed, but you could run it. That's only because Guile converts all the Scheme code to C code and then compiles it with the C compiler, and then you end up with a single application at the end. Did I say Guile? I meant Gambit. With Gambit converts the Scheme code to C code and compiles it with a C compiler to end up with an application. Guile is more of an interpreter that can be embedded into a C program, and it can precompile Guile Scheme source into binary files, but they're not executable files that can be run. They're a specific bytecode format that gets loaded into the Guile interpreter. So the question is, can you build a complete application with embedded Scheme bytecode and run it? That's one of the things I wanted to do with my mesh project, and I actually recently had been working on that. Recently meaning 6 to 7 months ago, I guess. But what I would like to do is be able to provide a compiled application that was written in Scheme and give it to somebody to run it on their system. Antler says this is exactly what the Chickadee bundle manual page says, static and Linux only. So it looks like Dave has already done the research on that. So Guile Chickadee bundling. Oh, there's a Chickadee bundle command. Cool. Only supported in Linux, maybe possible bundle on Mac OS. So, I also see he says bundling is a problematic way to distribute software. Yeah, definitely. It's not great, but for something like a game, like let's say a Game Jam game that you're going to just distribute once and probably never update again, it's a good thing to do, I think. Carswell's Coat says, sounds like you're re-implementing Common Lisp. No, we're not really trying to re-implement Common Lisp because Common Lisp has a completely different model. We don't really want to re-implement Common Lisp. We want to make Guile capable of building compiled applications, not an application that's loaded into a memory image and distributed that way. That's not a bad way to do it. It's totally fine. And I'm sure SBCL has highly optimized code for that stored memory image, but we're talking about Scheme here. There may be some interesting pointers found in the Chickadee implementation of, come on, Chickadee bundle. All right. So yeah, like I said, this is something that I'm personally interested in. I like game development. I'll be doing some more game development soon, probably on the next Ludum Dare that's coming up, or maybe even the Spring Lisp Game Jam, whenever that gets announced. I don't know when that's going to happen, but there's somebody in the chat right now who probably knows that. So yes, distributing games cross-platform, kind of a important thing, but also applications. Like if you were to write a really cool Guile application that you want other people to use, then you probably want to distribute it to other platforms that they might be using without them having to compile it themselves or download the source. So it's important. All right, more flagship projects. GNU Geeks is a good example of a flagship project. This is a project that is notable, which means it's interesting and people sort of are drawn to it because there's something about it that is particularly interesting or useful. And also, it's known that it's written in this particular language. So GNU Geeks is the best example I can think of a flagship project for Guile Scheme, because everything is written in Guile Scheme and you configure your system through Geeks using Guile Scheme. Guile needs more flagship projects, whether they are games or really useful tools, or yeah, just like games or tools, really. Or let's say you rewrite Emacs in Guile, like a kind of Emacs in Guile, or you make the Guile equivalent of the Nixt browser, which is written in Common Lisp. Now, I don't really recommend someone run out and try to write a Nixt clone in Guile, but that is something you could do. It would be a notable project written in the language. Tim Krapp gives a couple good examples. DWL Guile could be an example of that, if it becomes more well-known. GNU Shepherd and Mcron could also be considered flagship projects. DTAL Guile, I haven't really looked at that one very much. Let's see. Dave says that he needs to schedule the game jam. Yes, you do. Let's see. Antler says there's an increasing amount of tiling window manager and input stack stuff in Guile. Yes, we need more of that. So we need more flagship apps like games, tools, either command line or graphical, window managers or desktop environment style tools, hackable common programs like web browsers or editors. Alejandro says in the chat, new trend, rewrite it in Guile. Okay, that's what we got to do. All right, so now everyone, your mission is to go to every thread about a new program written in some language and just tell them, hey, you should rewrite that in Guile. Because if you do that, then maybe people will actually, they're not going to rewrite it in Guile, but maybe they'll get annoyed enough that they'll go look at what Guile is and then join the cult. SLS says River Guile. Sure, someone should implement that. Does it exist? Oh, it's very new. Okay, River plus Guile. I have heard of that actually. Ankit says there is an WL roots binding for Guile. I haven't wrapped my head around WL roots yet. Yeah, that's kind of a lot of stuff in WL roots. Let's see. Data Monoid says we might want to make target pages to make things more interesting. Do you mean like a website someone could land on to learn more about Guile? And cool YouTube shorts for Guile? Yeah, I don't exactly know what a cool YouTube short for Guile would look like, though. That's the thing. It would be nice to capitalize on the shorts and TikTok video trend, but it's kind of difficult to do that for the stuff that we talk about on this channel. I did make that one short, like, what was it, 2 years ago? Yeah, probably 2 years ago. Like the org Pomodoro timer thing. But, it's, for something like Emacs where you have to, like, zoom around on the screen to show different stuff, it's a lot of, intensive editing. Alejandro says, that's how Rust got its trendiness. Yeah, that is definitely one way. Anyway, I'm sure that people can think of more types of flagship apps, like let's say media creation apps, which is something I'm really interested in, like graphics, audio. Oh, well, okay, 1 second. Graphics, audio, video, etc. So like more cool apps. Like that's a media creation app of some sort. Could be a really cool way to draw attention to Guile if you could do it well. An example of that would be like Overtone for Clojure. People don't really talk about it as much anymore, but it did get kind of a lot of attention back in whenever that was, the 2010s time frame. Overtone is basically a library for doing live coding of music using the Super Collider engine, and it's pretty cool. I think people still work on that. What is it called? Z Rhythm. could also be a flagship project, but because it enables scripting with Guile. But I don't know if that's really advertised quite as much. Antler says maybe a next-gen VCS in Guile. Well, what I would say is a code forge written in Guile. What is it called? Guile is one example, but it's kind of like not really being worked on as far as I can tell. Guile. Does this site work anymore? Yeah. This site used to work. It doesn't work anymore. Is there like a history for this site? I don't see one. Anyway. Who are we talking about here? Antler says, who said that? I wrote a git util in Guile too. Okay. Fedi code forge. Yeah, something like that would be cool, I think. Like a federated code forge. So anyway, stuff like that could be really cool. It could be a flagship project where someone could be like, oh, like, okay, so you're telling me that Guile is cool? Like, what has anybody written with Guile? Well, then you can just give them a list of cool programs that can go install and run that are written with Guile, and they can see for themselves what Guile is all about. Fade says the Radical Code Forge is pretty interesting. What is Radical? Peer-to-peer code collaboration built on Git. Okay. Okay, cool, but where is the fact page? Cryptographic identities for code and social artifacts, uses Git for efficient data transfer between peers. I mean, that's interesting for sure. There's already stuff going on in the Geeks community. What's it called? System reboot. Arun Isaac. So here we go. So I know that Arun is working on a lot of these kinds of projects. Where is the project list? About me? No, home. Maybe it's on home. Home is where the projects is. Live hacking a Guile web server. Okay, that's cool. That's from a year ago. Where is it? Feed? No, we already have that. So, system reboot, public inbox for help, Guile email. There's something that Arun's been working on for Geeks, I think, that's sort of like a distributed, man, the name escapes me. I feel like it's like right at the end of my brain. I can't remember the name. Anyway, point being, something like that could be cool. There's already some work like that going on right now in the Geeks community, but I kind of feel like it's more focused on how Geeks likes to work. I think if you were to come up with a code forge that's more modern, like Forge Joe, but maybe you know, unique in its own way, then that could be useful. Peter in the chat says, is there a good text UI library for Guile? Yeah, there is one called Newt. I think that's built into Geeks, though. Guile incurses. I'm sure there's an incurses binding. Yeah, there's an incurses binding. But in Geeks, there's something called Newt. Oh, okay. Guile Newt. It's a package in the Geeks repository. So, yeah. So it's text mode widget-based user interfaces. So if you've ever been blinded by the red and blue colors of the Geeks graphical installer, then you've seen Newt in action. Let's see. Craig says feedstock. What's that? Feedstock. Haven't heard of that. Data Monoid says something like bun zig could be nice for Guile IMO. How does that relate to Guile though? Rewriting Guile and zig. Yes, the radical website looks pretty nice. That's for sure. Okay. All right, we got like 10 minutes left. So the last thing I wanted to point out as a possible way that we can all help to improve the not so much popularity of Guile, but make it a place where people might be more willing to jump in and start writing apps with Guile is having a larger and more visible community. So there isn't a lot of Guile activity on the public internet. If you go to Reddit, etc., it's kind of like there are Reddits for things like geeks and Guile, but they're kind of quiet. A lot of discussion happens on mailing lists, which most people avoid like the plague. And there isn't really much promotion of Guile happening on, social media, YouTube, etc. Aside from what me and Andrew Tropin are doing. I mean, Andrew's been doing Guile videos and Geeks videos for as long as I have been doing videos on Emacs, etc. And he's gone way more in depth than I have. But between me and Andrew, I think that we may be the only people who are covering Guile in a modern way. So when people go looking for Guile, what they're going to find is a bunch of white background mailing list pages that are on GNU servers, which is not bad because that's where all the development activity is happening, but that's what the activity is going to look like. It's not going to look like a community where there's a lot of cool things happening, people are building cool projects. It's just going to look like a bunch of mailing lists where people are discussing bugs. So I think that for Guile to be more appealing to the general audience of programmers, we're not looking for everybody in the world to come write Guile code. I don't believe that popularity is an important metric. However, to continue building out an ecosystem with useful stuff for the people who want to use Guile, it's better to have more people who are interested to come and help, because a small group of people can't do everything. So there needs to be more people involved to help things out. So how do we accomplish this? Well, obviously, more what we need is more people talking about Guile, teaching Guile, sharing projects written with Guile on various social medias, including video platforms. This also requires, there being people or people creating projects with Guile who are excited to talk about them. So, I'm trying to do my part by teaching more people Guile. I'll be, putting out a lot more, written content, video content, etc. on Guile specifically in the coming months. But I want more people to start actually making projects with Guile and sharing those projects, not only just in our community, but elsewhere on the internet. Because, if we all just sort of share the Guile stuff in the System Crafters forums or IRC, that's great. But it doesn't really get more broad attention because this is not anywhere near the biggest YouTube channel on the planet. So, all of you who are here know about this channel, but we're basically invisible to the rest of the internet. So going somewhere else like Reddit or other developer websites to share what you've done with Guile would be useful for the Guile community, because it gets more people to know about Guile and see what's possible with Guile. So I think it's a good idea. I mean, Alejandro was joking, I think, whenever he mentioned, maybe he wasn't joking, maybe he was serious, when he mentioned that we should be going to different places and telling people, hey, you should rewrite that in Guile. Well, I think we should be going to other places and sharing what is being created with Guile so that people have an opportunity to learn about it and maybe consider using it. I think there's a lot of interest in Scheme in general, because there's a lot of interest in Lisps. And I think people who are interested in Lisps are generally interested in learning about other Lisps, just to see like what interesting capabilities you can get from a different Lisp language. So Common Lisp obviously is the most, okay, between Common Lisp and Clojure, I don't really know which one is the most popular, but both of them have much more mind share than Scheme does. But people definitely know that Scheme is a, minimal, elegant, powerful language. However, it's harder to get into Scheme development because there are so many different implementations, and none of them really stand out as being like the best one to try. Like Racket may be the one, but I personally feel that Racket is not a Scheme. It's more of its own thing, and they're gradually moving more in that direction. It's not really a Scheme anymore. It can do Scheme, but it's more than Scheme. So I don't really classify Racket there because Racket is Racket. Racket has its own branding, its own universe. If you want Scheme, there's a variety of different implementations to use, but it's extremely difficult to find a Scheme that feels like home. I have, over the span of, I would say about 20 years. Yeah, it's probably been 20 years. I have sort of struggled with trying to find the ideal Scheme implementation to use. The closest I got before I started working with Guile is Gambit, because Gambit allowed me to write the kind of applications I wanted to write. But it also wasn't ideal for its own reasons because of the compilation to C and sort of like the requirements of that. Guile being a more interactive environment, interpreter driven, but still having just-in-time compilation, etc. Like it has more qualities that I like, but it also has things that are not necessarily as ideal. However, because Guile is already being used in things like Geeks, there's already a community around it. I think the opportunity is there for Guile to be the one, to be the Scheme implementation that you can send somebody to say, here, use Guile, you will learn Scheme, you can write some cool stuff with it, both on desktop applications and the browser, maybe even mobile applications too, if mobile browsers get the WebAssembly features needed for Hoot to run successfully. I really feel like Guile could be the one, but it really needs the work of the community to help with some of these things that I'm suggesting that need to be improved, to write applications that are interesting that other people want to look at and maybe get inspired to write Guile themselves. Also, they need libraries to use to write their own applications. All this stuff matters. All the things that I mentioned today matter for making Guile the place where someone can go to find a home Scheme implementation to use for all their personal projects and to really get the most out of Scheme. So going out and telling people about Guile is great, but we need some of these other improvements to happen too, so that someone who comes in doesn't get discouraged when they see, sort of the state of things, like maybe the way the manual is organized, or maybe the lack of certain libraries or whatever. We want people to come in and feel immediately like they can get something done with Guile. So there's many reasons why, let's say there's many different areas where effort is needed from the community to go and help with these things. And I hope that the stream today has sort of inspired you with some ideas where maybe you could go get involved. Go to the Guile Devel mailing list, go chat with people there. Go to the various different existing Guile libraries if you want to contribute to any of those. There's usually mailing lists for those, or you can just reach out to the author directly, because a lot of these libraries are just really small-time projects. I mean, they're feature-rich projects, they're useful projects, but usually it's just like one person working on them, and they often don't get contributions. So I feel like if you were to go and try to contribute to a project, the person who wrote the project would be happy to have you to come and help. I really feel like the opportunity is sky high with Guile for people who want to get involved in free software projects, to contribute in a meaningful way that actually would have a directly visible impact on the Guile ecosystem and the community and the perception of Guile as a language, and Scheme even. So I don't know. Maybe this is useful. Maybe people will think about it and try to contribute more to Guile. I'm certainly going to do my part. There's a lot of things I want to do. I have a lot of projects in mind that I want to work on. I don't have a whole lot of time to work on these projects, so I'll probably be trying to find people to help. So if you want another way to maybe get involved in Guile projects, just kind of hang around the IRC, the Subscribers IRC, the the forum, etc. Because I'm occasionally talking about projects that I want to do, and maybe there's one that you can kind of pick up and work on if you want to. All right, let me check the chat one last time before I end the stream. Let's see. Alejandro says Hoot is a good platform to promote Guile. Yeah, Hoot could be the entry point. Right now, it's not, because it's still not something where somebody could easily go start writing Hoot code. You kind of need to know Scheme already, and you really kind of need to know how to, work with JavaScript and the ecosystem. But whenever Hoot libraries are more common, where you have JavaScript bindings already written for Hoot to the JavaScript code you need to use, and when the compiler, I'm not going to say when the compiler is easier to use. Whenever it's easier to just produce a program from Hoot and run it without, having to fiddle with it too much, I think that it's going to be a really good place to send people, because it's also going to be really easy to share an application you've written that runs in the browser, like a game or some other kind of app. Like, for instance, if you wanted to write a note-taking app in the browser that works on mobile with Hoot, you could do that. You could share it to somebody, and they could use it and be like, oh, wow, this is cool. And then you could tell them, I wrote this in Guile, and it's compiled to WebAssembly to run in the browser. So, yes, Hoot is probably the best way to promote Guile right now, which is why I keep mentioning it. But Guile itself has a lot of utility, and I think that we just need some extra work here and there to help that. Okay. Let's see. Anything else? Alejandro says in the chat, ripgrep is a big selling point for Rust. There's also bat, exa, etc. Why not in Guile? That's a good point. I mean, like, can you write a cool command line tool that is kind of flashy in its own way and maybe useful, that could get picked up somehow by, Hacker News or some other place like R Programming or something, that would be a way for people to learn about Guile? That would be one way. If you want to do some stunt programming to just draw attention, then you could do that. Let's see. And Peter says, why not? The distribution problem. RG is a static binary. You drop in the path and it works anywhere. Yeah, I think that whole static linking or bundling aspect of Guile needs to be figured out. And if somebody can go, come up with different options for that, that would be pretty useful, I think. Just to have a standard way, or even a build script that you could share with other people that can use as a starting point to build their own Guile application and bundle it in a way that it can be distributed across various different platforms. Definitely that would be a prerequisite. Michael says, I'm in your learning Guile class. Not much I can do to help, but by learning Guile, you are helping. You don't realize it yet, but if you're learning Guile, eventually you're going to want to find a way to use the knowledge that you're gaining about Guile. I mean, using it for geeks is one way, but maybe you decide to write, a program that's interesting and useful to other people, like what Glyneth did with Guile Stash. Learning is the first step, but the point of learning is the desire to do something. So after learning, you're obviously going to look for a project, and if you have a set of options to choose from, or in other words, if we have like an organized place, at least in our forum, that has a list of projects that people could contribute to, which I think I saw somebody already created the forum thread on this, which thanks for doing that. I don't know who did it. I just saw like a notification. But a place like that has a list of projects that people might want to contribute to would be a good place to go look for things you could do to help, even with just a beginner level knowledge of Guile, just, from having just learned it. So anybody should be able to contribute, in my opinion. Okay. Grizzly says, a lot of useful information to digest. Yes, I hope it wasn't too much, but I wanted to just sort of, get some inspiration out there in case anybody was interested to help. Tempcrap says, most of the Haxor and script kiddos are on the Fediverse. Yeah, there's a lot of Guile and Lisp fans in the Fediverse, so you should go sign up for a Mastodon account somewhere or run your own instance if you want to. But definitely there's a lot of discussion about Guile, Scheme, etc. More on the Fediverse than on Twitter, I've seen. Craig says, love the vision. Let's make it happen. Even just learning Guile and talking about it is more a step in the right direction. Yes, I agree. Talking about it more, telling people about it, definitely are ways to get people involved. Alejandro says, I remember all the crap I wrote in Ruby when I was learning it. Well, Ruby's cool, but it's not as good as Scheme. Okay, all right. I think that's it for today. So thank you all for listening to me ramble about the different ways I think Guile can be improved. I really do hope that some of you are motivated to try and come help. Join the forum if you haven't already, if you want to have a place to discuss these things. Also, the System excuse me. I apologize. System Crafters IRC. But go and contribute to the mailing list for Guile in the various projects, like I mentioned. And there's also a Guile IRC channel in LibreChat. Just go to all these places and just see how you can help. I'm sure that many people will be glad to have your help, and we'll be glad to see more people joining the Guile community. All right. And as Osloy says in the chat, Guile Lambos for everyone. Yes, we're all going to become unfathomably rich, unfathomably rich, and have Lamborghinis pouring out of the sky for learning and promoting Guile Scheme. Tim Krebs says, I love writing Guile, but what bothers me is the performance penalty. I don't think there is a performance penalty. There's a lot of work being done to make Guile faster. Okay. Hope you all have a great weekend. Let me know in the comments what you think. And also join us in the places I mentioned before. Also let me know what you think there. Until next time, happy hacking. We'll see ya.